Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
You're on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
Also, check out the podcast below in the description.
All right, John. Brandon Aiyuk, the pick that we loved when the 49ers made it. John Lynch was on Tim Kawakami's podcast to talk about a number of things. He talked about Brandon Aiyuk. He was, I would say, nothing but encouraging about Brandon Aiyuk. You and I have talked about this a lot from your time in the NFL, that a player would get drafted, that first day of rookie minicamp or OTAs would arrive, and everybody from the organization would want to get a glimpse of the guy just to have this first kind of gut reaction. Do we like him or do we make a mistake? And John Lynch called the man spectacular, said his nuance and route running was very impressive. Needless to say, the Niners are loving Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, we call it, you don't want the Danny Watkins, where you know right away you're in major trouble.
That was the Eagles' offensive lineman, yeah.
And I do think with wide receivers, it can be difficult, right? You got a lot moving on. It's a timing position. You have to learn a new playbook. This is a guy that, as someone told me yesterday, is like he was in Rockland 2.5 years ago, right? Like he was in JC ball. Like this is pretty quick. If you would have asked him when he was at Rockland, you're going to be a first-round pick and start the starting wide receiver for Kyle Shanahan in 2 years in training camp, probably would have been like, what? I mean, that would have been a pretty bold jump. And, yeah, I mean, this was Kyle Shanahan's baby in the sense of it was clearly right there with CeeDee Lamb, like the top-rated guy on his board. And I think anyone that watched Brandon Aiyuk liked him. But the one thing we know about this pick, like, we know what Kyle Shanahan, we've talked a lot about this, what he likes in wide receivers looking back. Will he like Henry Ruggs? Will he like Jerry Jeudy? It's clear what he likes. Physical guys that block and guys that break tackles. It's why he liked Debo. It's why he loves CeeDee Lamb. And it's why he liked this guy. Like if you would have told me and you before the draft, and you saw a lot of, I mean, hell, you knew who Brandon Aiyuk was when he was a sophomore, right? Before he kind of came on the scene when he was Nikhil's right-hand guy. And he didn't get that much pub. He obviously was much more productive. That the 49ers, just going into the draft process, their number 2 wide receiver on their board was Brandon Aiyuk. I wouldn't have believed you. And now I think after hearing everything, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And then when you double down that it's encouraging to see that, and I was picking up lunch the other day, and clearly Greg Papa's got a little practice access. He said, God, he looked pretty good. And then he went into like 3x3s and option routes. And, it's like, Greg, we get it, football. But he said he was really good at the practice he was at on Sunday.
Well, I think there's 2 things about him that that make him really interesting, right? Well, there's a lot of things, but in particular, one you hit on, which is they didn't have the last pick of the receivers and then just took the guy, right? They could have taken a lot of other guys too. Hell, they could have used, let's not forget, I mean, they took Aiyuk at 25, but they had the 14th pick, right? I mean, they could have had any of them. It's not that they took Brandon Aiyuk ahead of T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr. If they loved Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb enough that they didn't think the value was there for receiver 25, they could have done it at 14 where they took Javon Kinlaw. Now, part of this is the balance of, well, we can kind of do a 2-for-1. Fine. But I have a hard time believing they would have taken Brandon Aiyuk at 25 if it was just one of those, we need a receiver, let's just take the best guy available. They had him targeted. And when you tell us that you had a guy targeted, when you tell us you love a guy, when all the evidence says you really wanted this individual player, then we almost judge you a little harsher on his performance, right? Because it wasn't some guy that fell into your lap and you had to take a guy. This was the guy that you wanted. And so, I think for them, there's a little more pressure that way on him, because Kyle's made it clear this is exactly who I wanted. Number 2, we've had a couple wide receiver injuries too. So Brandon Aiyuk being good and Brandon Aiyuk being good week 1 are 2 different things, right? Because we know the first 4 weeks of the season, especially with Deebo Samuel out, depending on how long, they're really going to need this guy.
You know, a guy I forgot about and listened to Lynch talk was Richie James broke his wrist this offseason.
That's right, yeah.
And, he didn't play a huge role on offense. He's more of a special teamer. But he did play sparingly on off. Like, he was a wide receiver who dressed on game day. So he's got a broken wrist. You got Debo with a broken foot. And you're really dependent on this individual. And just from a talent standpoint, like, Ayuk's a different animal than Trent Taylor, right? Aiyuk is just a more talented player in theory than Kendrick Bourne. Now, Kendrick Bourne might be better today, right? He just played NFL games. He won't be nervous in the sense of, like, it's human nature to be nervous before a game, but, like, he's played in the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, he knows what is He knows how to perform in this offense specifically.
Yeah, but I think when they just go, who's your most talented guy with Debo on the sideline, you go Brandon Aiyuk, which to me is like there's tangible pressure on him from that standpoint. He's talented. To put it like, they're just going to need him early on, one. And two, I do think he won't be compared to Judy, CeeDee Lamb, I'd say, right? And Ruggs, in the sense that ultimately Kinlaw is going to be compared to, like, well, can he take Buckner's spot? That he's kind of filled that role.
Right.
Where I do think Aiyuk will be compared, and we were talking about Jalen Hurd, kind of his little sweet spot where he was drafted, is that, well, you could have taken T. Higgins and you could have taken Porter Jr., who were the next couple guys taken.
You're thinking NBA.
Yeah, Pittman Jr. I'm thinking Michael Porter Jr. So Pittman and T. Higgins, who are long, big, they kind of would have been, in theory, a compliment to Debo. It wouldn't have been that weird if they would have taken one of those guys, right? Isn't Pittman, what's he, 6'4", big body guy? You and I made a video on him. He's a big, like, contested catch.
Yep.
I mean, he's a motherfucker. I mean, Frank Reich compared him to Vincent Jackson. I push back on that comp a little bit because Vincent Jackson, people forget, like, ran like a 4.4 at 6'4". It's what made him such a freak. You know, Pittman, you and I, when we were really watching him, it was like, you know, he's probably like high 4.5 guy, but you can run 4.5 if you're 6'4", right? Part of what makes Keenan Allen
tackles.
special, yeah, is Keenan Allen such a great route runner, and he's a physical player, is that just T. Higgins is just, and Pittman, to me, those are the guys that we'll talk about when it comes to Aiyuk in the comps. And I think those guys, especially Pittman, he's going to play on a team that looks like it's going to be good. Ayuk's playing on a team that's going to be good. That I think we're just going to keep those guys in the vernacular, which I like. That's what makes this shit fun. Like, what got Vladdy fired? You chose Bagley over Luka. Like, you carry that, right? That's just, you could have had this guy, which is what makes drafts just so special, is when you have the opportunity to take a player, who did you choose not to take, right?
And everyone has misses. The question is, are you good enough to overcome your misses? Are you good enough to say, I know we needed a quarterback and we didn't take Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, but I took us to the Super Bowl 2 years later. Everybody chill out, right? And then then we drafted Nick Bosa. And then
sometimes it's just it's between two players. And usually that's higher in the draft, right? When it was Bosa or Quinnen Williams, like, they got the right guy. Remember Reggie McKenzie? It was like, is he going to take Amari Cooper or Leonard Williams? And then after the draft, it came out like, listen, it was a really hard decision. We love Leonard Williams. We kind of had the shoulder red flag. And just big picture, even today, I think Reggie works for the Dolphins. Reggie was right on that one, right? Like, he chose the right. Every team in the league would rather have Amari Cooper than Leonard Williams. It's a little more complicated, I'd say, with wide receivers, right? Once you get past if there's a clear one guy in a draft, because you get to clumps in the late first round or in the third round. Like. It's like, do you want T.Y. Hilton or three other guys? And at the time, it's crazy when we look back, right? Let's say Brandon Aiyuk becomes a Hall of Famer and T. Higgins is out of the league in 4 years and Pittman is just an okay player. It'll be like, God, they nailed that one. What if it's the opposite, right? Ayuk's just okay and Pittman is just a 7-time Pro Bowler.
What if Laviska Shenault's better than all of them?
It'd be like, well, Laviska, you guys are Pac-12, like, you're right in their backyard. You saw this guy. It was like, his comp was like Sammy Watkins. What were you guys doing? But at the time in the draft room, you don't know any of this shit. You just know on tape. And I do think it's fair to say when they took Aiyuk, Pittman had how many years of playing at a really high level at SC, right? Several.
Right.
T. Higgins, I don't watch every Clemson game, but I've been hearing T. Higgins' name and just college
since he was a true freshman.
Yeah, so is swing for the fences too bold of a pick? Too bold of a statement? Like, this was a very, very bold move, though, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, based on a long track record of production.
His track record.
Yeah,
right?
I think the other elements, the Niners, if John Lynch was here, he'd say, well, understand, I know Herm Edwards really well. we felt like we had a really good handle on the guy, right? That was part of the other thing he told Kawakami is it's not just that he's really prepared, he's really good, but he also works his ass off. Anything you tell him, he's going to come back to the field and execute. So part of that was, does feel like that was part of the reason. Maybe that's not why Kyle liked him, but it might be part of the reason why it was so easy for other people to jump on board is once they kind of found out who they were drafting, that he fit the MO of what they want their guys to be.
Well, from everything I know, I don't know much about T. Higgins. Pittman is all the character stuff,
Yeah,
right?
He is, yeah.
When you look at the team that I'd say the Colts, just like Kyle Shanahan, you'd say they look at similar type players,
right?
In terms of what they like mentally, physically, work ethic. Like they are really into that shit. Every time you see Chris Ballard talk, whenever he comes up on, he's just like doing an interview with Pat McAfee. It's like, God, this guy's a badass. No wonder people like this guy. I just feel though, it's just always risky when you have, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, come the spring if these couple conferences don't play, and who knows how many games we get out of the other conferences. Limited track record on the field. You just don't know. Like part of what's easy about CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy or Ruggs is like, yeah, we got like 3 years of tape of these guys kicking the shit out of everyone, right? It's just then it comes, does he fit our offense? What's the person like? But the track record speaks for itself.
But is doing it in the Big 12 the same as doing it in the NFL, right?
Yeah, stuff like that.
So there is always a projection, no matter how much evidence you have.
Aiyuk, you just go, this guy just really just had one big year, and it was a sweet year, but it's just, who knows? Just there is a lot of pressure on the kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I also think if you were going to say, okay, receiver.
But it doesn't that Dante Pettis had a couple years of high level success and it doesn't work out. So I'm not saying it's like.
But the difference is I didn't like the Pettis pick and I liked this pick. Like I agreed with this pick. I did not agree with that pick.
I agree.
Especially
but
he's not going to be a returner.
But my pushback is that you can't just go, well, he's got 3 years of production at a high level for a team that went to the play. It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
No. But so much of it, too, is the context. Like, okay, how was he getting that production? Why was he getting that production? What was it about? Right? On one year, he had John Ross next to him. If you were arguing the counter, you'd be like, yeah, of course Alabama guy X could get open because they also had to worry about Alabama guy Y.
Yeah.
Right? Of course CeeDee Lamb got – again, I don't actually believe this, but of course CeeDee Lamb got open. They threw the ball all over the place.
Well, I think a big question, like in that offense.
Again, don't believe that, but
yeah, and you often hear it in the Oregon offense, is like, well, he's wide open. He doesn't even have to. I mean, he's just catching balls wide open. What does he have to do? That was a knock on CeeDee Lamb. Like the plays were really easy, and then they break it down of him like breaking 7 tackles against Texas. You're like, yeah, I think he'll be okay.
But it's also, is he wide open just because no one can? Because he's getting doubled and he's getting away from those guys, or is he wide open?
One headline I saw yesterday: could 3 Cowboy wide receivers hit 1,000 yards? And you're like, well, I mean, not crazy, right? If Brandon Aiyuk even sniffs 1,000 yards, the 49ers would be thrilled, right?
Yep.
Would you agree 800 to 900 yards of Brandon Aiyuk production would be very good?
Yes. Answer this. So you brought up the Danny Watkins. For people who aren't familiar with the time the Eagles drafted a 28-year-old firefighter.
27.
Against Middlecoff's advice. But
that's a lie. I watched a little bit of him at Baylor, and he looked good.
Do you think? What do you think if a draft pick is a 50-50 proposition? What is the hit rate for once the guy's in uniform? You go out and see him in your team's practice. Is it now you're like 70% sure that he's good or bad?
Yeah, I'd say 60 to 70. Okay. I mean, if he really is popping, not just a flash play, like every day kicking everyone's ass, and you
can have a really good idea once you see him against your guys.
Still some unknown though, like how will he handle the pressure once the media starts coming after him and the fans? Right. How will he handle
getting hit, thing with like practice, for quarterbacks?
I saw Mike Sando tweet this, and he was dead on. He said, right, because in fairness, we were talking before we recorded the pod, like. I'm like, guy, every wide receiver that was drafted in the first round, if you just go to Roto-World, I've seen a headline over the week of like, could Justin Jefferson be the next version of Chris Carter meets Randy Moss for the Vikings, right? Jalen Reagor. I saw the wide receiver coach for the Eagles is like, this guy has the swag of a Pro Bowler. And I mean, every quote on all these guys, even Ruggs, it was like, started slow, now dominating. It's like, okay, the thing with practice after a while in football is like in basketball, your moves are your moves. Like you're either just better or worse than me, right? In baseball, my pitches are my pitches. In football, you run different plays. Well, after a while of like a week in camp, especially even for a rookie, you know your defense's plays, right? Like you know that they run like, especially the Niners, they run like a couple coverages. I know where the wide receivers or the corner's going to be, so I can start cheating. It's why that we always say now with first round talents, they should just be able like it's less like it's harder to judge them because your standards are way higher and you're more critical of them. But I think when you get like later round picks, it's like, oh my God, this fifth rounder is just killing it. Well, he knows the defense. It's why they really get magnified in the preseason game because you're like, well, you don't know what's coming.
Right.
Right. And then it's like, okay, he passed that test. How about the regular season where you really don't know what's coming?
Is where
there are all these tests.
This is where when you play for Kyle Shanahan, you're just going to be at an advantage if you're a wide receiver. You are going to have an advantage. Whether it's your advantage or his advantage, you benefit from the advantage.
Well, wouldn't you say this? Like Kendrick Bourne's a good example. He actually, looking back, is like he went to the by far a top 2 or 3 D1 AA program, especially beside like North Dakota State. Yeah. You'd say Eastern Washington is cream of the crop. They've produced a bunch of NFL guys.
They've produced record-setting offenses for produced under Bo Baldwin.
And then their wide receivers are translating to the league, right? Cooper Kupp's like a legit stud. But he's going to probably have a decent year this year, and the Niners are not going to be able to pay him, right? Even if it's just someone gives him $3 or $4 million when he becomes a free agent. I think it's fair to say, and I like Kendrick Bourne. I've actually been really impressed with him the more I watched him. Probably won't ever be as good as he will be with the 49ers. Like the pressure of like the Dolphins sign him, whatever. Now he just might be a good
But it's also
player.
one of those where you're like, Emmanuel Sanders, 49er. Oh, but he goes to the Saints. He'll be just as good.
But he's already good.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, does somebody who
you're saying that team like him.
I'm just saying guys tend to go to other teams who it was easy for them to do the same thing that guy did in his previous team, because it's just easy to be like, oh, he did that for Kyle, he'll come do that here for us with the Packers. Matt LaFleur loves Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So you could argue teams like the teams that run their scheme would be more interested in Kendrick Bourne.
Now, if he ends up in the Bengals.
But there are going to be teams that just kind of, Houday, we apologize. We'll get into that later. Just keep an eye on that situation. I'm just big picture. We'll just keep tabs on him.